I arrived in the United States of America in June of 1989. I arrived in New York City. Since I was a teenager, I had the dream to come to America. I wanted to experience the American dream. I want to be in the land of the opportunity. I knew that if you wanted to be great, you have to come here and you have to make it here. You can be famous in Brazil, in France, in Mexico. But if you don't make it here, you're not considered a great. US is the #1 in the world. I wanted to test myself. I'm very confident in myself and in my work, so I moved to America. When I arrived in New York, I had a friend of mine. His name is Machado. He was a friend of mine when I grew up in Brazil, but he lives in New York and he was there for a long time with his father. He helped me out. On the first day that I arrived in New York, he took me to Brooklyn. Now you imagine Brooklyn 1989. It was pretty crazy. It just like in the movies. It looked like the same scenes I see on TV. I love it because I knew that's my place. I'm here to stay, but I was a little bit in shock. New York City in '89 was a special place. Just incredible. The vibe, the energy, the people walking in the streets. They say that New York in the 70s, 80s, and maybe half of the 90s was considered to be the classic America. And I was right there, right in the middle of the whole thing. And the US was really crazy for business, for opportunity. It was vibrant. And I arrived to stay, to experience everything, and to make a name here. First I live in Queens, then Manhattan, and I have a little apartment, and I start teaching private classes. I met some of the famous martial artists that I used to see in the magazines. I participate in martial arts seminars and training with Bill Superfoot Wallace, Joe Lewis, Benny the Jet Urquidez. I one time went just to watch Danny Nozanto seminar. Danny Nozanto came to New York. I saw in a magazine that he was going to be there, and I went to watch, and I took a picture with him. And the funny thing is that about 20 years later, when I already had TaeKwonDo schools in Los Angeles, at one point Danny Nozanto came train in one of my schools. He used to train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with Joe Machado, who was my partner at that time. And then there was a really funny thing. I told Danny Nozanto, 20 years ago, I arrived in America, I went to see you, and now you come to my school 2-3 times a week in the morning. That's really funny. And that's how life is. What I also did in New York, I competed. I started competing in point fight karate. I learned the rules and I did some competitions. I did very good in point fight karate. I competed for the World Professional Karate Organization. The head of the organization was Aaron Banks. So I competed in his competitions in board breaking, sparring, point fight karate. Had a lot of fun. I saw an advertisement of a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu seminar at the Hunter College in New York. So I met for the first time Grandmaster Helio Gracie. I met Helson Gracie, the man who introduced Jiu-Jitsu to Hawaii. And I met Royce. Royce, a few years later, became very famous because he was the first UFC champion. Rorion told me in that opportunity that he was planning to open the first Jiu-Jitsu Academy in Los Angeles, and I kept in contact with Horion, and later on he sent me the invitation for the opening of the academy. I still have the envelope and the invitation. The first Jiu-Jitsu Academy was inaugurated in Torrance, California in September of 1990. Horion told me also that he was launching a VHS tape, Grace in Action, with the goal to make Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu known to the people in the US. This is 1989. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was beginning to be exported to the United States. This is before MMA, this is before the UFC, before the first academy was even open. At that time, Horion was teaching in the garage in California. And later on, I ended up training with the Machado brothers. And I got my black belt with the Machado brothers. It is my lineage in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But this is a historical meeting with the Gracies. And the pictures I took are part of history. Is a document of the introduction of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to America. I arrived in California in 1990 and I started competing in Taekwondo. For the first 3 years, I competed in 14 tournaments and I won 13 gold medals at the black belt heavyweight division. It was old school Taekwondo, a lot of kicks with the back leg, no electronics. Most of the competitions was on the floor. It was rare to have the colorful mats that you have today to protect. It was considered the old school tough Taekwondo. One of the first friends I made in California is J.J. Perry. I met him right in the beginning when I arrived. I used to go see some of the martial arts schools around, check it out. And I went to this school in Beverly Hills, Jun Chang Taekwondo. I met this guy, he was working there. I told him I just came from Europe and New York, and he told me he just came from Texas. He just arrived in LA. We arrived at the same time, basically. We got along, and eventually we used to train together. There was a training here in early 90s with some of the members of the US team. Young Lee was there, Clay Barber, Scott Fuji, James Choi, J.J. Perry and I, and many others. There was people visiting all the time. We trained together for a long time, and JJ had eventually announced that he was going to open a Taekwondo school, and he invited me to work for him. He gave me my first Taekwondo job in LA. He opened a school. The name of the school was TaeKwonDo West in Inglewood, and I was there on day one, and I worked there for a long time with J.J. Perry. I'm very grateful to two friends. One is Kwon Sung Choi. When I arrived in California, he was the president of the Taekwondo Federation of the state. He was one of the coaches of the US national team. He wrote a letter to the immigration. He put in the letter that the US need me to be here working and developing Taekwondo. He said I was one of the top names in Taekwondo. And another one is J.J. Perry. J.J. Perry wrote a letter saying that he had a job for me. So I got these two letters. I hired an immigration lawyer in Santa Monica. His name is Humberto Gray. And when Mr. Gray saw the two letters, and also he saw my magazines, newspapers from South America, from Europe, I brought some VHS old tapes with TV shows that I participate. When he saw the whole thing, he told me that he was going to apply for Outstanding Skills Green Card. And I was not sure at that time, but he did apply. And 2 weeks later, and then he got all the paperwork, I was approved for Outstanding Skills Green Card, which is the top of the list, the most difficult green card. Starting in 1988, I was featured in the front cover of the top martial arts magazines around the world. Magazines from Europe, from Australia, from South America, from the United States. I gave interviews over and over. I wrote articles about technique, lifestyle, stretching. I even interviewed friends of mine on the martial arts field. For about 20 years, I worked for magazines, especially in 6 languages: Portuguese, Spanish, French, German, Italian, and English. Millions and millions read the articles I wrote and the interviews I gave. This is the pre-internet era. And I started in '88 to about 2008. And I have in my office close to 500 magazines. I calculate I was at least in 600 of them. 60 countries had access to my interviews, my magazines, my front covers. It was a time that there was no internet. The only way that you had a possibility to create a global reputation in martial arts was to be in the martial arts magazines. And I was in a worldwide range of magazines consistently over and over and over. It was a time that you had to wait 30 days to buy a magazine to know what's going on in the martial arts world. Today is different, you know, in the same day because of the internet. Some of the magazines I work with was Karate Bushido in France. The editor was Pierre-Yves Benoliel. Karate Bushido magazine was one of the first magazines to go full color in early 80s. Very famous French magazine. In German, I work with Norbert Schiffer, editor of the magazine Budo and Karate Journal. I also work with Michael Dubner in Germany. He has different magazines and I appear in many of his magazines. In Spain, I work with José Fraguas. The magazine was Cinturón Negro, very popular magazine in Latin America, Mexico, and of course in Spain. In the beginning, Cinturón Negro was mostly for Spain, but later they start publishing French, German, and Portuguese. It became very big after around the year 2000. In the US, I work with John Corcoran from the magazines Inside Taekwondo, Inside Karate, Inside Kung Fu. John Corcoran was a very good friend of mine and he helped me a lot when I was starting to write articles in the US. But I work also in Brazil with magazines Combat Sport and Kiai, based in São Paulo, Brazil. Very popular magazines in Brazil. In England, I work with the magazine TaeKwonDo and Combat. Those magazines put me in the cover a few times. In Italy, I work basically with the magazine Samurai. In Australia, with magazine Blitz and Australian Taekwondo, among many other magazines. Those are a few of them. The reach of these magazines was global. I became a well-known name around the world. Thanks to all these editors and friends, we made it happen. It was a lot of work. It was a great time. The first time I heard about how good Jiu-Jitsu was, it was in early 80s through my Taekwondo teacher Carlos Lodo told me about it. And I always remember that. Later on, in 1986, end of 86, I decided to take Jiu-Jitsu. I was already a Taekwondo black belt. I used to train and teach almost every night. I found an academy close to my house and I practiced for 2 months, but the instructor told me I had to leave. He told me in order to continue with the Jiu-Jitsu training, I had to quit Taekwondo. So I decided just to find another place, and there was only 2 places in the city. So the second place I went was a very famous professor, Francisco Sá. He was far from my house, but he was the pioneer of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the city. Since the 1960s, he was teaching there. I started training with him twice a week, and I trained a little bit in '86, but in '87 I was able to train almost the whole year. I learned all the basics. I was a white belt. I stayed as a white belt the whole year with him. And in the following year, in 1988, in the beginning of the year, I went to Europe. So there was no Jiu-Jitsu in Europe. Basically, Jiu-Jitsu was being exported at that time here in America. It was the first place. So my white belt knowledge was pretty impressive to myself, because in Europe I was able to play fight with some of my friends, black belt champions in Taekwondo and Karate, and I used to be able to take them down, control them and submit. This is only with the 1 year training, with the fundamentals. When I used to train with Professor Sa, I got a couple of my Taekwondo students involved in Jiu-Jitsu. So once in a while, on the weekend, on Sunday, we used to meet and train a little bit of Jiu-Jitsu, review the positions, the self-defense, and the ground techniques. And I found a video, a VHS, of 1987 with my student Halda Gomez, who also was involved in Jiu-Jitsu at that time. And believe it or not, we used to roll sometimes in the garage, and we had no mats. It was just, we had knee pads, and it's pretty crazy, but I have the video to prove. We used to spar in the regular floor. It's a real training. It's when I look back now, I think this is pretty crazy, but that's what happened back then in the 80s. And in regards of Grandmaster or Professor Francisco Sá, he was in Brazil and he stayed there teaching. I was able to meet him again in 2013. I looked for him. He was no longer teaching. He was 77 years old at that time. Found his son, and I got in contact with Professor Francisco Sá, and I met him in 2013. I visited him at home. He was very happy. We took some pictures, and he insists that I hold his red belt. So in the pictures, I'm holding his red belt, and we had a great time. This was July of 2013 when we met again. And then in September of the same year, I heard the sad news that he passed away. But I'm very happy. I trained with him. He gave me good techniques, good training, and that's how I had my first contact with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. In 1992, I got back in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I met John Machado by accident, one of the Machado brothers. He invited me to his brand new academy, and I never forget the first day I came by to the Machado Academy. It was the first academy they opened in America, the original academy in Redondo Beach, California. I came Saturday morning for the first time, and when I walked in at the academy, Chuck Norris was there, training with Rigan Machado and with Carlos Machado. I told the Machados after a while that I had the connection with all the magazines, and I proposed to write a very nice article about them, make an interview photograph them with Chuck Norris. That was going to be the best. And they spoke with Chuck, and Chuck agreed. So after some time, we did the interview, I wrote the article, and we scheduled a day to take pictures. I took pictures that day, and I sent this whole thing to about 8 or 9 magazines around the world. I sent to few European magazines, Australia and Brazilian, and here in the United States, I was able to get them a couple of front covers with the article and the pictures. One of the things that I remember well from the day we took the pictures is that they wear blue pants and Chuck Norris had black pants. Chuck Norris wearing black pants was okay because that's normally part of his uniform of TaeKwonDo. But I remember questioning the Machado brothers in regards of the blue pants because I follow Jiu-Jitsu prior to that for a long time in Brazil. I used to see magazines and I trained. And never in my life I heard of blue pants. And we took the pictures for all the magazines wearing the colorful pants. And I have 2 stories about it. One was of a magazine from São Paulo, Brazil. The name of the magazine is Kiai. Kiai was very popular at that time. It was a big magazine, a lot of pages. I wrote an article about them, the Machado brothers. The name of the article was Chuck Norris' New Passion, Jiu-Jitsu. And the article was not a cover, but it was a big article. And I went to Brazil right after the magazine came out. I went to São Paulo because I was teaching a series of TaeKwonDo seminars in the area. And I stayed there for 10 days. In those 10 days, I spoke with a lot of people from martial arts. Everybody knew me over there, and they knew I was writing the articles. And people was questioning the blue pants more than talking about Chuck Norris. There was people not happy, and there was people that really liked the different uniform they wear. So it became something controversial.
Eu também tenho outra pergunta aqui que muita gente tem feito lá no Brasil, sobre os kimonos coloridos, a introdução da cor no jiu-jitsu.
Não, mas isso foi engraçado porque começou de uma maneira engraçada. Quando foi até um amigo meu, André Lima, que tinha introduzido a gente com um amigo dele chamado Rosé, que tinha uma revista europeia. Ele chegou pra gente e falou: pô, eu queria fazer umas fotos, vocês, os 5 irmãos, tudo na revista. E eu tinha visto um aluno de karatê do Chuck Norris usando o paletó branco e uma calça preta. Aí me deu uma ideia: pô, por que a gente não muda para essas fotos, botar o paletó branco e a gente bota uma calça azul? Aí todos os irmãos compraram uma calça azul e fizeram um paletó branco e a calça azul. Aí, pô, na minha academia todo mundo queria comprar calça azul. Aí começou assim, aí daqui a pouco começaram...
Padrão.
Aí começou todo mundo querer ter kimonos coloridos. Foi uma coisa assim, que foi tipo um acidente, né? Assim, mas não foi assim uma coisa que eu chegava, vou botar com a mão, foi uma coisa que aconteceu, tipo um acidente. Né?
E vocês acabaram introduzindo essa, não vamos dizer mania, mas essa instituição que hoje todo mundo usa um kimono de uma cor diferente.
É legal, eu gosto do colorido.
Você falou sobre...
When I was back in LA, I had the opportunity to have Pierre Benoliel from the French magazine Karate Bushido, one of the biggest in Europe. He came over and he already had my article because I sent it to him, but he did not publish. He told me he wanted to meet the Machados in person and take some pictures. So I scheduled with Jean-Jacques and John to meet in Venice Beach, California. So after Benoliel went back to France, he called me and said, André, I think I'm gonna put the Machado brothers in the front cover because the pictures are beautiful and your article is pretty good and they're teaching Chuck Norris. So that was the first Machado Jiu-Jitsu front cover in Europe. They got introduced to Europe with a uniform that was white and blue. So this became kind of a talk because some of the Gracies not happy with it. I was in contact with them because of the magazines, and it became a little of an issue. Some people didn't like, but with time, everybody started wearing different color of uniforms. The whole uniform suddenly was blue or black. A few academies did not accept that. They kept going with the white uniforms until today is like that. But the colorful uniforms became part of the Jiu-Jitsu culture. It became part of the identity. And it started accidentally with the Machado brothers, or somehow I was involved on it because of the magazines. And a lot of people don't know that. That's how the whole color today, there's pink gis, red gis, gray gis. There is a whole industry of uniforms for Jiu-Jitsu with color, and it started in 1992 with the Machados. I trained at the Machado Academy for a few years in early 90s, and then finally my wife and I opened our own academy in Culver City, California. When we opened, we started with TaeKwonDo and we won a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but I was not a black belt. There was not many black belts at that time. So I asked John Machado who he wanted to come over and teach one of his students. He had a couple black belts already, and he spoke with Rick Minter. He was the first African-American black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu from the Machado Academy. So Rick Minter liked the idea. He came and started teaching Jiu-Jitsu, and I kept training with him. But after a couple years, for some reason, he decided to quit. And I had Gerson Sanginito teaching. Gerson is from Rio, black belt in Judo. He was a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at that time. I met him at the Machado Academy. So Gerson came and started teaching at our academy in 1998. He stayed with us for about 6 years. Gerson became a very good friend. He was studying at that time to become a director. He was going to college. And we ended up working in movies later on. But during the time he was at the academy, it was interesting because he was pretty connected to the Gracie Barra. Every year, I was able to train with all these top names in Brazil because they used to come here and just to invite them to our academy. I remember well Dracolino and Nino, Márcio Feitosa, Gordo, Sapão, Ilhobel, Tinguinha, many names. I was able to train with them. They would come, stay a few weeks or a month, and we had some very strong training. Some of them actually, because of Gerson's help, They end up staying in the United States, open their own academy, and today they're here. They run their own little organization with 1 or 2 academies. So Gerson helped a lot of these people, and the training was good. And in 2004, Gerson opened his own academy, and then John Machado, one of the brothers, the first Machado that I met, moved in and became a partner with us. He was with us for about 10 years teaching Jiu-Jitsu, and I trained with him non-stop. We had a lot of celebrities coming to the academy, UFC fighters. Dan Henderson used to come train, Lyoto Machida, Pierre Sukuju, Rico Rodriguez, many of the Pride fighters.
KTLA, the CW.
He is one of the most dangerous men in the entire world, and I say that without a hint of exaggeration. This is Dan Henderson. Trained in Greco-Roman style wrestling, Dan has fought in the Olympics twice and holds the Pride Fighting Welterweight Championship belt for mixed martial arts. Strangest part of it all is he's also a really nice guy. That being said, he was more than happy to throw me around like a sack of potatoes. He will be facing his longtime rival Vanderlei Silva, the current middleweight champion of Pride. It's been 6 years since their last fight, in which Silva beat Henderson by decision.
Looking at our faces afterwards, you wouldn't think I was the one that lost, but you know, he won the fight. He did a good job then, and I'm much more prepared and much more skilled now than I was then.
So that's like a choke. It's like a choke. No?
He's not the only one who thinks that. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu professor John Machado has trained many Pride fighters over the years and says Dan has the edge.
I think he's more mature. His mind is better prepared. You know, the mental game is the key, so you must be ready physically and mentally.
It was a good time. I met a lot of people. We had also celebrities. I remember one time boxer Sugar Ray Leonard came over to watch a class, and many other famous martial arts people used to stop by. It was a phenomenal time. Good jiu-jitsu, good friends, and good memories. After John Machado, we had Owano. He was there for 10 years with us. And now we have Chris Wolford. So that's all the teachers that we had in our academy in about 30 years. And of course, I'm a black belt. I teach jiu-jitsu, mostly private classes. And I teach groups when they ask me to do it. I taught a lot for Gerson, for John Machado. And this is the history of Jiu-Jitsu in our academy. I'm a 4th degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Riga Machado and John Machado, they are the ones who gave my belts, except the purple. I got my purple belt with Gerson Sanginito. And Gerson was interesting. He loved competition. He made me fight a few tournaments. And I remember I took 2nd place in the Pan America in the year 2000 in Florida. Because of Gerson, he kept insisting, you gotta fight in Jiu-Jitsu. So I ended up doing, and I did very well. And that's all the memories of Jiu-Jitsu.
Vai, tá bom, André, vai, André. Bora, Deco.
Acredita, André.
Vamos, não para, André, vamos.
Olha o peso, André, olha o peso.
Esse tape aqui, tá bom? Aí tá bonitinho, pô, cara. Vou pegar aqui.
In 1994, I met Taekwondo black belt Cristiane Paiva. We got along, we got married, and we opened our academy, Lima Taekwondo and Martial Arts Academy. The first location was in Culver City, California, and it's still in Culver City to this day. When we opened the academy in the 90s, there was not many Brazilians teaching martial arts in the United States. Here in California, we had the Gracies, the first ones to do it, the Machado brothers, and a couple other guys teaching Jiu-Jitsu. Today, you find Brazilians in every corner teaching Jiu-Jitsu. But back then, about 30 years ago, we became pioneers of Brazilians teaching in America. It was in the 90s was the beginning of what I can call a colonization of the martial arts industry here in America. Today you have hundreds, you may even have more than 1,000 Brazilians in the country teaching, but at that time the market was dominated by the Koreans. Here in California, 80% of the martial arts business in the 90s was owned by Koreans. It was either Taekwondo or Hapkido. Today, if you look specifically into the Taekwondo community, the Koreans are probably about 20%. The other 80% are teachers and masters from Mexico, from the Philippines, from Brazil, from Europe. It had changed. The whole thing has changed. And today you see a lot of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. In the 90s, it was a new thing. Nobody knew about it, but because of the UFC and the movies and a lot of advertisement, today Jiu-Jitsu is a big business in California. But my wife and I are one of the first Brazilians. We are pioneers of Brazilians working this kind of business here in America.
From day one, when I met Andre, we both had already a very strong connection. We like the same things. We are from the same country, both Brazilians. We have the same values, both hard workers. We love to train, we love to teach, and we love to fight. And that's how everything started. In the 90s, Andre and I opened our first location. We started everything alone, only him and I, inside the mats on the first day with no students. 30 years later, we formed near 800 Taekwondo black belts. And together with our Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu partners, near 50 Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts. Today, we have a martial arts empire. one of the greatest memories I have here was able to see our daughter Aika Lima training, playing around, stay with us the whole time when you're teaching. So it was part of her education. I was very blessed for that. Also, it's so important to have this and to offer for all the kids, women, teenagers. And our daughter was involved with us all the time.
Once the COVID-19 pandemic started, we switched everything online. We had our Culver City location, Torrance location, and the after-school programs. We started doing Zoom classes, so everybody switched for the training on the computer. We had 6 classes a day. Our program of teaching was very exciting. It was difficult to do. It's not easy to teach online, but all the students kept going for a long time, and along the way we had new students signing up with us. We had students from different countries. Sometimes we were teaching here in California at 4 or 5 p.m. and there was people taking classes in the Philippines at night time. So we kept going strong all through the pandemic, and when the pandemic finished, we had a lot of people coming from different schools that closed down. Schools around the neighborhood, they unfortunately never came back in business. So our academy got full of new students, some of them black belts, brown belts, coming from other places.
At the end of the 90s, I started training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with Professor Gerson Sanginito, which I stayed with him for about 5 years. He was one of our Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu partners here at the Lima TaeKwonDo Martial Arts Academy. After that, I trained with John Machado, Professor John Machado, for about 10 years. I earned my purple belt with him. After that, I trained for another 10 years with Professor John Wano. Today, I'm a black belt first degree, and I have my own Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu women's only program. Back there, when I began, there was no women in class. I was the only one many times in the mats. So I got the experience to be the only woman in that class, and I create my own program based on that, based in the basics of Jiu-Jitsu. And today, our program is very successful. I have students from 8 years old all the way to 60 in my class.
In 2013, I was inducted into the Taekwondo Hall of Fame based on my global reputation. I am considered an ambassador of Taekwondo worldwide, and because of my work as a pioneer in the north of Brazil, I brought Taekwondo to the area, and today Taekwondo flourishes over there. It was an honor to be selected. The Hall of Fame happens every 2 years in a different continent, and in 2013 in the United States I was inducted next to so many friends and champions and personalities. Taekwondo is an Olympic sport. There is a population of more than 40 million people practicing around the world. The Hall of Fame was a validation. When I was inducted into the Taekwondo Hall of Fame, there was a lot of big names. Some of them, Michael Ardner from Germany, Dirk Jung, Henk Meyer from the Netherlands, Joseph Salim from Denmark, Isaías Duenas and Romero Guzman from Mexico. They used to be very famous in the 70s. They, besides being Taekwondo champions, they participated in the beginning of the kickboxing movement here in the US. Said Najim from Canada, Gordon Frank, another one from the times of kickboxing with Bill Wallace and Joe Lewis, and Dana Ree, Olympic champion, besides many other friends and champions from countries around the world.
Very nice recognition for my work to be part of the Taekwondo Hall of Fame. I was invited before in 2007 in New York. Also was invited in Korea, Kukiwon, but I was not able to participate at that time. And this time I came here in Las Vegas, and not only to get the certificate and the title, but I saw a lot of old friends from Europe, champions, masters, pioneers, trainers, and people that I didn't see for a long time. They're all here. And it was good to be together with old friends that share the same love for the Taekwondo, and so I'm very happy, and for my contribution also that I did to develop Taekwondo. It's been almost 35 years non-stop, and so this is really nice to have.
Every story has a beginning, and my beginning was in Brazil. In October of 1965, I was born in the north of Brazil, in a state, the name of Piauí. I was born in a farm, and my father, his name is Luis Carlos Lima. He originally is from Rio de Janeiro, and he married my mother, Luis and Luisa. And they married in Brasilia, capital of Brazil. But because the family inherited a big farm in Piauí, they decided to go to Piauí, and I was born there. I lived there for 7 years, It was kind of isolated place. My father's family is all concentrated in Rio de Janeiro. He's from Rio. And my mother's family is spread in different states in Brazil. Some of the family are in Piauí, Ceará, which is another state in the north, and Brasília, the capital, and Rio. My mom's side of the family, we are descendant of Lebanese and Dutch. My grandfather and grandmother was from Lebanon and Holland. And from my father's side, it's all Portuguese and Spanish. The last name Lima, it's originates from Spain. From one part of Spain, the name of Galicia, that's where Lima originates. Lima is a pretty popular name in Brazil. So basically, I was born in the farm, and it was my father, my mother, myself, my sister Patricia, and my grandmother Maria. So that was the family. We lived there until 1973. We moved to the capital of Brazil, Brasília.
Observar as regras do Taekwondo. Observar as regras do Taekwondo.
I chose Taekwondo because not far from my house there was a Taekwondo school, and some of my friends will practice Taekwondo there. It was a Korean master. His name was Soo Myung Choi. He immigrated to Brazil like so many Koreans did in the 70s and 80s to export Taekwondo out of Korea. He took me to the academy of Master Choi, signed me up, I start training, and on the first day of class, I guess was a very lucky day for me, because on that day I solved a lot of problems on my life. I never had to look for a profession. I found right there. A lot of people are confused what they're gonna do in life. A lot of people, they actually change professions along their life. They don't know what they wanna do, they keep changing. On that day, I found my passion. And my beginning was strong right away. I was starting to go to the academy and train at home the whole time. Everything I learned in the academy, I practice at home. And my parents got a little bit concerned. They thought I was becoming part of a cult, because that's all I want to do. I don't want to go play soccer or anything that the kids will do. I just want to practice Taekwondo. I'll do millions of squats at home. In a very short time, I was able to have full splits. So that was the beginning. In 1982, our master, Soo Myung Choi, he decided to move to Rio de Janeiro, and he sold the academy to one of the black belt students, Carlos Eduardo Lodo. He was the top Taekwondo fighter in Brazil, 6 times national champion, and the first Brazilian to win a medal in international competition. He won a bronze medal at the World Cup Taekwondo in early 80s in Denver, Colorado. Carlos Lodo became my new master. And my academy was not any academy. It was, at that particular time, the academy that had more national champions in the whole country of Brazil. We basically dominate Taekwondo. And my new master, Carlos Lodo, he became my mentor, my close friend and mentor. Some of the lessons that he taught me that I always apply is, he told me, if you wanna one day be a Taekwondo teacher, master, you're only gonna succeed if you are able to teach a student that has no talent, a student that if you sign up in another academy, he's not gonna last. But when he comes to you, you make him stay in martial arts, train him, and make him a good student, maybe a good black belt. I always got that in my head. The situation of Brasilia at that time in Taekwondo was very vibrant. It was a lot of rivalry, and rivalry made good fighters. During that time, I start to compete, and that's the place that make me the way I am today. The values that I got from that time, from the teachings I received, stay with me the whole life. In 1983, in the summer, my family decided to relocate back to the north of Brazil. After 10 years in Brasilia, we moved back to the north to a city called Fortaleza, and the state name is Ceará. When we arrived in Fortaleza, we found out that there was no Taekwondo in the whole state. The thing that I like most did not exist in that area. And accidentally, I became a pioneer of Taekwondo. I introduced Taekwondo to the state of Ceará, a very big place in the north of Brazil. At that time, Taekwondo was very popular in the southeast and south of Brazil. The Koreans arrived in Brazil and looked for the biggest cities, the most popular cities, and opened their schools. But the north of Brazil, there was not a lot of Taekwondo. And at that time, 1983, Taekwondo was already approved for the Olympic program. The year before, in 82, in Paris, France, they approved Taekwondo to be a demonstration sport in 1988 in Seoul, Korea. Taekwondo was very popular, but in Brazil, the distribution was not good. There was a lot of Taekwondo in one side of the country and almost none in the other side. So I became a pioneer, and I started teaching Taekwondo there. I was the first one to teach. And around that time also, I did my vestibular. In Brazil, we call vestibular for exam that you do to go to college. I did an exam to be a doctor, to go to medical school. There was 3,000 people, and I took 6th place. The results come in a newspaper. I still have the newspaper with my name. So I was approved to the university. The name of the university is UFC, Universidade Federal do Ceará. Like UFC, the same name that now is popular because of the mixed martial arts competition. So that was the what happened in my life at that time. I had to make countless demonstrations to be able to introduce Taekwondo to the state of Ceará. The word Taekwondo was not part of the local vocabulary. Nobody knew what it was. They knew karate, they knew capoeira, judo, but every time I say Taekwondo, oh, I never heard of this. Many times I heard jokes. I went to a newspaper once, and the man made jokes about it. With those newspapers, TV appearance, I slowly start introducing. I start teaching Taekwondo. I made a Taekwondo official. I create the technical department of Taekwondo connected to the government. I organized the first state competition a couple years later. I took the first team to compete in nationals. I made Taekwondo popular in the city. I formed the first black belts, and today Taekwondo is very big in the state of Ceará. During that time, I ended up quitting the medical school. My sister continued. My sister Patricia became a doctor. She's a gynecologist in Brazil. But I decided to continue with just martial arts, and eventually I moved out of Brazil. I always had the dream to come to the United States. So the time in Ceará was a time of very much challenges in my life, but with very hard work, I was able to bring this beautiful art to that state of Ceará. And today I'm recognized as a pioneer in Brazil and worldwide by the Taekwondo Hall of Fame. During the years of 1985 and 1986, I did a series of pretty crazy Taekwondo demonstrations on TV. Some of them were shown at national TV. It was in the local TV and national. It became very popular in Brazil in martial arts. We did some demonstrations. I was actually inspired to do it because I read articles about a karate master. His name is Oyama, from a Kyokushinkai style, which is he used to do this kind of stuff, breaking bricks with his head, fighting a bull, and all kinds of crazy stuff. So I came out of idea, and one of my students, we trained him. His name was Ivan Alcantara. He lay on the floor and a car passed over his stomach, and I jumped over a car, not a little car, but a regular car. I run, jump side kick over the car, breaking something, and I used to jump very high. So instead of jump over people, I said, I'm gonna jump over a car. I practiced that a lot. I had a hard time in the beginning. I used to jump, but sometimes hit the edge of the car. With a lot of dedication, perfect the technique, and eventually I was able to jump over a car. And I had to do those demonstrations in Europe later on when I moved to Europe. And the most difficult of them all, I jumped from the 3rd floor of a building. Everything went okay. I became very, very famous because of demonstration. Some people say I was Superman, other people say I'm crazy. And that went on around 85, 86. We did these demos in Brazil, and I really established Taekwondo by doing those things, because everybody was talking about, and a lot of people wanted to do Taekwondo, so that was the story. Eventually, in February of 1988, I moved out of Brazil. I went to Europe, came to the United States, but the fate of Taekwondo in Ceará continued. I left 2 black belts in Ceará. I'm gonna introduce both of them. One was Adalberto Benevides. The other one was Raul Gomes.
Para ganhar impulso no Ceará, o Taekwondo teve uma boa ajuda. Raul Gomes, de 25 anos, e Adalberto Benevides, de 21, fazem parte do grupo que difundiu a prática do Taekwondo em Fortaleza. A dupla é destaque no Brasil. Hoje, além de atletas, eles também são professores e investem na formação de novos lutadores, enquanto se preparam para um novo estágio internacional.
O André Alex, nosso mestre, que atualmente reside na Califórnia e já é campeão dos pesos pesados daquele estado, atualmente treina com 5 integrantes da seleção americana.
Adalberto Benavides, when I left, was the one teaching Taekwondo there. He took over. And he became Brazilian national champion in Taekwondo, #1. In a short time, I only trained him for a few years. The training was crazy. We meet in my house, 7 a.m. all the time to run to the beach and work out over there. We used to do plyometric, circuit training, all kinds of scientific ways of training. So he became #1 in Brazil. And when I was in New York a few years later, in 1990, he wanted to be with me. He called me, "Oh, I wanted to come spend time with you, be in the United States for some time." So he came to New York City. A lot of my famous pictures that end up in magazines, it's Adalberto and I together. We used to go to the Central Park at night, jog, and start sparring in the Central Park. Sometimes people would stop and look at us, kicking each other. It was a very good time and good memories. So Adalberto was one of my black belts. Brazilian national champion, came to America, found a way to compete in the United States at the US Nationals. He took 2nd place. He had 5 fights. #1 in Brazil, #2 in the US with 5 fights. They contacted him to go to the Olympic Festival. So he won gold medal in the US Olympic Festival. He ended up going back to Brazil. He moved back because of the family. He became a businessman. He imports wine from Europe to Brazil now. He's a big businessman, very successful. So that's Adalberto, that's his story. The other one was Halder Gomes. Halder Gomes took over Taekwondo in Ceará when Adalberto later came to America to be with me. Halder opened a school called ATC. He had a beautiful academy, formed a lot of black belts in Taekwondo, and did a phenomenal job. I'm very proud of him. Fasting forward to early, around 92, I went back to Brazil to see him, to teach a seminar. I was already working in movies. I was doing small parts in Hollywood movies. At that time, those Hollywood movies was selling everywhere in the world and was big in Brazil. So I came to Halder Academy and I showed him stunt fighting, how to do fights in movies. And he never saw that in his life. So we did some TV appearance.
Taekwondo André Alex Lima passou alguns dias em Fortaleza matando a saudade de seus amigos.
Tem que ter alguma preparação para poder ensinar esses golpes e não haver acidentes?
Existem cursos, aos quais eu já fiz alguns nos Estados Unidos, de stunt fighting, que é exatamente para essas cenas de luta. E fazendo esse curso eu descobri que é mais difícil o papel de quem apanha do que de quem bate. Quem bate é fácil, é só dar um murro. Agora, quem apanha é que realmente é o ator. Tem que fazer o público acreditar que aquele golpe foi real.
Você já pensou em trazer um curso desses aqui para Fortaleza?
Eu pretendo no futuro, porque eu estou tentando abrir uma porta para os brasileiros, para, como eu, trabalhar em filmes nos Estados Unidos. Tentar no futuro, quando houver pessoas mais interessadas, em fazer um curso desse aqui no Brasil para abrir mais o campo para os brasileiros que pouco conhecem sobre essa arte de stunt fighting.
É um dos mais requisitados pontas dos filmes de artes marciais produzidos nos Estados Unidos.
O cearense André Alex Lima, de 28 anos, 1,85 m de altura e 90 quilos, é um bom exemplo de um atleta ator, exibindo as fotos que tirou ao lado de grandes astros do cinema mundial, como Lou Ferrigno, o famoso Incrível Hulk, e Arnold Schwarzenegger, André Alex fala de seus projetos para o futuro.
Eu já luto taekwondo há 16 anos e no momento eu realmente estou mais...
O cearense André Lima chega à Fortaleza para ministrar um curso de artes marciais. André Lima é exemplo de atleta cearense que deu certo. Praticou taekwondo em Portugal e na França. O espírito de aventura insistia em querer mais. E depois foi para Los Angeles. Neste período, ele conheceu e fez amizade com gente famosa. O ator Lou Ferrigno, estrela da série O Incrível Hulk. E não poderia faltar Arnold Schwarzenegger. Mas além de ser atleta de taekwondo, o André Lima também é ator. Ele fez um curso nos Estados Unidos e já participou de 3 filmes ligados a artes marciais.
Constantemente estou na capa e em artigos das melhores revistas de artes marciais do mundo, em toda a Europa, nos Estados Unidos, é claro, aqui no Brasil.
Raul Gomes, after seeing what I was doing, asked me permission to come to my house in the United States every year or every other year, and he basically begged me to introduce him to some of the people that I knew, the actors. He saw that I had the picture with Arnold Schwarzenegger. He kept insisting to get him to take a picture with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I did. And then he saw my picture with Lou Ferrigno, the Incredible Hulk, and then he wanted me to take the picture with Lou Ferrigno, and I took him. It was very easy. It was in Gold's Gym. We didn't really know Lou Ferrigno. We just spoke with him because I was working out over there. So I got Raul the picture with Lou Ferrigno, and then I had a picture with Cynthia Rothrock. Raul won a picture with Cynthia Rothrock. I had a picture with Don Wilson. Raul wants a picture with Don Wilson. I had a picture with my good friend Lauren Avedon, and Raul wants a picture with Lauren Avedon. Everything I was doing, Raul start copying everything, and I help him. I start introducing him to the people every year or every other year. He'll come and wanted to do the same stuff I was doing. Whatever picture I had, a year later, he went up with the same picture. And then, a year or 2 later, I decided to get him to do a little part in a movie. I call a friend of mine, Art Camacho, the famous Art Camacho, fight coordinator, director. Art was putting me to work in a lot of these movies doing little parts. I call Art Camacho, Art, can you help me? A friend of mine, I already taught him some stuff, and he doesn't know anything about movies, but he watches all the movies. Can you put him to do a little part in a movie? And Art Camacho, yeah, Andre, bring this guy in the summertime, and I'll get him to do a little thing, maybe in a Don Wilson movie. So Raul came, and then there was a movie going on called Grid Runners from Don Wilson. It was just a small part. Don Wilson will kick a door, and Raul was in front of the door, and he'll fall. That's it. Very simple. But Raul never did a movie in his life. He was extremely nervous, shaking, because he was worried about the timing. When Don Wilson kicks, falls at the same time. But anyway, Raul did the part, and I did know I changed Raul's life in that day. And he decided that he wanted to be part of movies. In the beginning, he didn't know what he was going to do. He started trying to do something in Brazil. First, he wanted to have an American movie, to go to Brazil and to film in Fortaleza, Ceará, our city, because it's a beautiful city. He tried that, didn't work, and then he tried many other things, and I was helping him every step of the way. He worked very hard for it. And then a few years later, after read a lot of books and came to my house many times and meet all my friends and a lot of people from the movies, he decided to direct a movie. I was pretty impressed with it, And I was responsible for it because I am the one who introduced Howdy to the movies. Without me, he'll never do a movie in his life, not even in his dreams. The name of the movie was Sunland Heat. And he decided to do that little movie in English. He invited me and he invited J.J. Perry. By accident, I changed Howdy's life completely. I introduced him to something that ended up becoming his profession. That's a thing. Howdy is a classic story of a student that looked up to his teacher and wanted to follow the footsteps. He wanted to be like his teacher. But he found his own way to become a director. Now he directs movies in Brazil, most comedy with martial arts. In February of 1988, it was Carnival in Brazil, and I had planned a trip to Europe. I did not know people in Europe. I flew to Lisbon in Portugal. The next day in the morning, I got one of those telephone books, and I looked through the martial arts section. And I found a Taekwondo school that I recognized. The school belonged to Grandmaster Chung Soo-yong. He was the man who introduced Taekwondo in Portugal. I went to his school. They received me very well. Master Chung was very nice to me. He told me I can just show up and train. And he put me in contact with Master Fraga. He was a master from another city. The name of the city is Porto, famous city where they make the wine. So Master Fraga, he came all the way to Lisbon to meet me, and he picked me up, took me to Porto. I stayed in Porto 1 month to adaptate myself to the country and also to the way Fraga teach Taekwondo. He wanted me to teach in one of his schools. He had several schools in Porto and in towns around Porto. He took me to a city with the name of Braga, beautiful city, and he gave me that school. He said, "You're gonna be the one responsible here." I moved there. And Braga was right close to the border with Spain. The architecture of the place was beautiful. The people very nice, very friendly. The students of the school, they got pretty attached to me. I was teaching every day, the whole time, dedicating. They got much better, quick, the technical level. They let me actually compete at the Portuguese national. And I was a champion, Portuguese national champion, even though I'm not a citizen. I competed in several local tournaments in Portugal. I believe it was 5 of them. I won all the tournaments. I was national champion. We went to Spain and compete in an open competition in a city called Vigo. Vigo was not far from Braga, because Braga was in the border and then Vigo was close to the border inside Spain. So I won this international competition in Vigo in Taekwondo. We went to Paris, France to compete in the Coupe d'Antony in Paris. And I was the best foreign fighter of the whole competition. I was very happy in Portugal. I could even stay there, but because I made a plan, I had a goal to travel through Europe. Eventually, after 8 months to be more precise, I moved to Paris, France, thanks to my friend Edouard Branco. He invited me to move to Paris, helped me to establish myself, gave me the job of teaching Taekwondo in his 2 clubs. One was in Antony, the other one was in Montrouge. That's the name of the neighborhoods. Edouard Branco took me to compete in different parts of France. He took me to Belgium, Spain, Luxembourg, and I won most of the competitions I participated in. I was featured in the magazine Karate Bushido. I met Pierre-Yves Benoliel, the editor, for the first time. Benoliel made a very big article about me called L'Homme de Rio, the man from Rio, even though I'm not from Rio, but that gave me a very big exposure in the martial arts world. I remember meeting during the competitions I participate with Eduardo Branco. I met the famous Dutch Taekwondo champion Henk Maier. Henk Maier was a world champion. He was very popular during the 80s. I met Joseph Salim. I met him in Belgium, in Brussels. During the Belgian Open, Salim became my friend. Later on, years later, he moved to California. I was already here. And he owned an academy here for many years until he passed away. When I had spare time in France, I took the opportunity of training kickboxing. I signed up with Dominique Valera. Valera was the king of karate in France. He was all over TV, everywhere. Very famous, very good fighter. So that was my wonderful adventure in France. And after France, I moved to the United States of America, and the rest history.